Having operated my vending machine business for a while, I made some really bad mistakes that I learned from. And I just kind of went into buying this business with the assumption that, hey, I'm going to make some big mistakes. I'll figure it out. A week later, they said, hey, you're not verified. You need to do it again. A week later, same thing. A week later, same thing. And I had no idea why it wasn't passing verification. And on July 31st, the business actually got suspended from Google. Tread lightly when it comes to Google, especially if your business is dependent on it.
Welcome to the Before You Buy or Sell a Business podcast, where we help buyers and sellers learn more about the acquisition process, discuss recent transactions, and stay up to date on the latest news in the market. Here's your host, Jared Johnson.
Okay, so today I've got Matt Crowder on the podcast. Matt bought a business and he's here to talk to us about it. I'm excited to hear his story and see what we could all learn from him. So how you doing today, Matt?
Doing well, Jared. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Excited to share more. Today it's 3 months exactly that I closed on my business. So a lot to share, a lot I've learned. I'm excited to share some with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, so you made it past the first 3 months, which I'm sure we'll unpack. So maybe before we do that, we could get a little bit of context about your background, like where you grew up, family, what you did as a career before you decided to buy a business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, lived there most of my life, went to school in Southern California, and then ended up moving to Utah 7 years ago. Moved out here. My wife was in school at the time, and just made sense and have a lot of family ties to Utah. Started out my career working in the technology industry. I was a customer service rep, a customer success manager, and a sales rep for three different software companies here in Utah. And overall had a good experience in that first part of my career. Did that for about 6 years, but always kind of craved something more entrepreneurial, and ended up learning all about buying small businesses, read the Buy Then Build book, which most people are familiar with. I read it multiple times and just kind of knew for myself that I wanted to buy a business. And so one thing led to another, and bought this business 3 months ago. And I actually do own another small business that I kind of started as a side hustle. So I have two businesses, and it's been busy, but it's been good.
So you read the book. We get a lot of people that say that's kind of how they either discovered buying a business or maybe just kind of learned a lot more. What were some of the kind of main takeaways from that book that you felt like really kind of pushed you into that career path?
That's a good question. The book really opened my eyes to the possibility of being an entrepreneur through acquisition, of buying, a boring business or just, a regular business. I had always been interested in entrepreneurship, and looking back at, when I was younger, I was one of those kids who was always doing lemonade stands. I sold snowflakes at one point. I made paper snowflakes and then went out and sold them. And there's even one story where someone gave me 10 or 20 bucks for a snowflake, and my mom made me go back and try to give the money back. But, what I realized through the Buy That Build book was that I didn't have to come up with a new idea, a 0 to 1 idea to be an entrepreneur, which for a long time had just seemed like the only way, and made me feel discouraged because I wasn't going to come up with the next great idea. But Buy That Build just kind of opened my eyes to the idea that I could buy just a regular business, and it could actually be pretty meaningful for me personally, professionally, financially. And so it just opened my eyes to that. And then I thought it was also just in general really helpful in terms of understanding the process, how to find a business to buy, how to communicate with brokers and sellers, how to ask the right questions during due diligence, and ultimately get to the point of closing a deal.
Awesome. Yeah, some great takeaways there. So yeah, I think it's funny. We often kind of figure out at a young age that we either enjoy like the sales process or kind of business, but maybe at that point in time, we don't realize like what we're actually doing. I mowed lawns as a kid, and, it was more like my parents said, well, you want to buy something that we don't really want to buy you, like figure it out yourself. And so it's kind of like, okay, can I use the lawnmower? So yeah, you don't really realize that those lessons, or I saw one day somebody said that was like the original GoFundMe, was figure it out yourself and go mow lawns, and maybe selling snowflakes was kind of your idea. I'm sure you mowed lawns at one point in your life, but it's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Let's talk about the business that you did end up buying, and then let us know how you found it, the listing for sale.
Yeah, good question. So maybe going back a little bit further, I read the book a few times and decided that this was what I wanted to do, but I didn't know exactly what the right timing would be for me. I ended up doing the Acquisition Lab, which is a course offered by the author of Buy Then Build. I did that in December of 2022 and decided to start searching while I had a full-time job. And I had it in my head that I would find a business to buy in order to quit my job. Ended up getting a couple of deals under LOI and tried to move a little bit maybe too quickly with those deals and decided to back out of them because for a few different reasons. But what I also realized was I was just trying to make it happen a little bit too quickly. And I was forcing deals for businesses that maybe didn't make sense for me. And so I ended up quitting my job in May of last year, May of 2023, and decided I would focus on building my existing business while kind of searching for a business to buy. So I had bought 6 vending machines a few years ago as a little bit of a side hustle, and decided to build up my vending route while searching. So I actually built my vending route last year from 6 machines to 36, and still have those 36 vending machines. But during that process, I was more kind of carefully searching for a business to buy, and I reached out to every broker I could find here in Utah, shared my information with them, but I ultimately just started, looking pretty much every day at businesses on bizbuysell.com. And then I reached out to the brokers about them. And so I found this business to buy in January of this year through BizBuySell. I reached out to a broker that I actually hadn't built a relationship with, but just reached out to him showing interest in this listing.
Awesome. Yeah. So there's always kind of two rules of thought in the search community, or, just people that are looking for a business. You have those that say, completely quit everything you're doing and go, 100% in and find a business. And then you have others that say, keep some income. But I think really what they're trying to say is be a little bit more careful with what you're looking for. And I do feel like when you have some income coming in, you're less, I guess, desperate could be the word, to just find a business and try so hard to make it work. And I often come back to the same analogy. It's like dating. If you kind of say, well, I really need to find someone so I can get married and move on, with that part of my life, you might make a mistake if you just jump, head first into it. So same thing with business. If you take time and really make sure that as a business that's going to work for you, just as you would when you're dating, probably end up with a much better relationship down the road. So it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a very goal-oriented person, and so I set a goal and I'm going to do everything I can to achieve it. So I got a couple of these deals under LOI and started doing the due diligence and just had to take a step back and realize, okay, you're forcing it, you're pushing it to happen, and this really doesn't make sense. And it was hard because I wanted to buy a business. I wanted to move forward with that. I was excited about the idea of owning a business, but luckily I was smart enough to not actually buy something that didn't make sense for me and be patient enough despite it being hard to do that.
Yeah, that's some great insight. I'm glad you waited and made sure you found the right one. So let's hear about the business that you end up buying. Maybe tell us what the business is called, what you do, all that fun stuff.
Yep. So the business I bought is called Western Stairlifts. People are watching the video. You can see it on my shirt here. We install home mobility equipment like stair lifts, vertical platform lifts, in-home elevators, and a variety of other things. Although those are the 3 main products that we install. It's a good little business. It was pretty small. We do these installations all throughout the state of Utah. We typically are installing these products for the elderly or the disabled folks that have a hard time with their stairs, have a hard time moving within their homes. It's definitely a niche business. Not everyone needs a stair lift, but what I like about it is that when someone needs a stair lift, they truly need it. It's something that they have to have in order to live in their home. So the only other option for many of our customers is to move. And also, it really feels like we're helping people because in many cases, they rarely go into their basement, or they just can't use that part of their house, and it's a big burden and it's painful for them to walk up and down the stairs. And so it really feels like we're doing some good when we help these people by installing these products.
Yeah, that's great. Anytime you can feel that there's more of a mission behind it, probably gives you a little bit extra motivation on those days when you're tired. It always feels good to have a customer thank you rather than, kind of grinding them into a pulp to get the deal done. So that's great. What were some of the things initially when you found the listing that kind of drew you to the business and made you want to look further, and then ultimately move past, the point where you kind of had ended it on some of the other deals you were working on?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. There were obviously a number of different things I was thinking about, a number of different criteria that I had in my head, but two of the main ones were, number one, I was looking for a business that was not capital intensive. Having owned vending machines, that is a very capital intensive business. You have to buy a machine, and if it's in a good location, you'll make your money back for that machine in 2, 3 years. And so I wanted a business where we could, in this case, buy a Stairlift from our supplier, install it, and collect money from the customer. That obviously is a lot more than what we bought the Stairlift for. So I was looking for something that wasn't capital intensive. I was also looking for something that I felt like I could really wrap my mind around. And the way that I thought about it in my own head was just a quote unquote simple business, something that was just really straightforward in terms of why the customer would need or want that product. Having worked in the software industry, I felt like a lot of the time I was trying to sell software to the customers. I had to try to convince them why they needed it. And obviously it was a decision that they had to make. It wasn't something I could make for them. And in this case, I don't have to do a lot of convincing. I don't have to convince people that they need a Stairlift. They come to us because they need one. And it's a very simple, simple concept. They can't get up their stairs. And so now we're giving them a product to help them get up their stairs. And I just felt like if I could wrap my head around it quickly and easily, then I could identify ways to grow the business versus having to spend a ton of time learning the business, understanding who our customers are, what the product is. I felt like if I could skip a lot of that, then I could focus on growing the business pretty quickly.
Great. Yeah. Awesome answer. Definitely makes sense. So, when you were looking at it, at what point did you have communication with the seller?
I think I saw the listing for a couple of weeks and decided not to reach out initially, but once I did, I had a conversation with the broker, and within a week was able to speak with the seller and just got a good feeling from the seller. Felt like he was a good, honest guy, and I felt comfortable with him as a person and moved forward from there.
So, did they let you know why they were selling?
Yeah, so the seller he's in his 60s and had some health challenges and was kind of at that point where he needed to retire. So it made a ton of sense. It was a pretty natural transition.
Great. Yeah. So that's kind of something that I try to get people to really pay attention to is why they're selling. Oftentimes, I'll even say, ask them several different ways, make sure you're getting kind of the same answer. And it sounded like you had a pretty good comfortability with the seller right off the bat. That's always very helpful as you're moving forward, especially during negotiations. Do you remember what it was listed for? And then if you had to negotiate at all?
So it was listed for $450,000. Again, a pretty small deal. And that was at just over a 2x multiple of SDE. So I didn't feel a big need to try to negotiate given the low multiple, and ended up just buying the business for $450,000.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. Seller discretionary earnings at 200, 225 or so, and then a purchase price of 450. You're definitely not in really a position to try to kind of come down further from there if you're really interested in it. Sounds like you were comfortable with the seller at that point, so I think you made the right move in not negotiating from there. I know we included some working capital for you. I think it was about 100,000, and if I remember correctly, we split up that with having a line of credit and then also having the working capital. So, and then you put 10% down, met the SBA guidelines. So pretty standard kind of easy deal for a bank to work on, and then for you to understand as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with some of the deals, I mentioned the two deals that I got under LOI that didn't move forward with. I made offers on a few other deals, maybe end of last year, fall, winter of last year, and missed out on them to other buyers. And I felt like in at least one of those cases, it was because I was trying to negotiate and they picked a better offer. In hindsight, I'm glad I didn't get those deals because I'm very happy with having bought Western Stairlifts. But once I found this deal and felt like it was a good deal, and in this case, the seller was having health issues. He needed to sell the business. He wasn't asking really more than he needed to. I just felt like I was ready to buy a business. This felt like a good one, and I should focus on buying it and then focusing on how I could grow it versus spending extra time trying to negotiate and potentially lose the deal.
Right. And for a couple $1,000s, you're probably just going to upset the seller. And then if you do move forward, if one party feels like they're not getting a fair deal, then that's where we see a lot of friction. So smart move on your point. Kind of look down the road and say, hey, I'm going to be okay with this business. Let's start to focus on, what we can do in the near future to grow the business. So, you didn't do a seller carry note. Some people are of the thought that it's absolutely necessary. Some people don't like it. What was kind of your thinking behind not doing a seller note?
Yeah, so I actually did ask for a seller carry note, and the broker and the seller pushed back pretty hard against that. And again, I just felt like it was a good deal. And obviously I did introduce some risk by not having that, but still just felt good about it. And so I was willing to move forward. I did also learn that the seller had some personal debt he was trying to pay off, and it would have been more difficult to pay it off, as quickly as he needed to with the seller carry note. So I just said, let's continue moving forward with this.
Yeah, that makes sense. And since you were getting along on the front end during the negotiations, did you build in a period where the seller would stay on and help?
Yeah, so initially they had offered a 30-day period for the seller to stay on and help, and I kind of used the fact that they didn't want to have a seller carry note to ask for a longer transition period. So they agreed to a 60-day transition period, and he's still and up to a year just over the phone. Although I haven't had to call him much in the last month, but yeah, I think that was a smart move by me. It was really helpful to have him available for 2 months. He was very good to work with, and, showed up when I asked him to, and was very helpful throughout that 60 days.
Wow, great. Just sounds like a really good transaction so far. So maybe we could talk a little bit about during that process and going through kind of getting the loan or anything. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
In terms of due diligence, I wouldn't say that I would really do anything differently. I felt like I got all my questions answered. With the loan process, yes, actually. I initially was going to work with you, Jared, and then or you had kind of already reviewed the deal before I got the LOI signed. But I had another lender that I knew personally here in Utah that I was planning to work with on any deal. And so rather than go with you, who had already pre-reviewed the deal, I started working with this other lender. Got a month into the process, and all of a sudden they told me they needed me to put twice as much down. I could have made it work, but didn't really want to, and so I ended up going back to working with you. And if I had just worked with you from the beginning, I could have closed the deal 4 to 6 weeks earlier. But it ended up taking, quite a bit longer than I had hoped, just because I made that decision, and then it ended up being the wrong decision. So yeah, I guess that would be my answer in terms of what I would do differently.
Well, I'm glad we were able to help you and get it done. And I think one of the big challenges with SBA lending, and especially when it comes down to a niche like business acquisitions, is for people to understand is that there's very few SBA lenders that do this type of lending and do a lot of it. And so when people are out looking, they kind of have this assumption that everybody does it exactly the same. And so when they don't understand that, and they could run off and work with someone maybe they know, or a lot of times we get, oh, well, my dad's been friends with the bank manager down the street for 15 years. They'll do anything I work on. I have no problem. And we just try to get them to understand at the end of the day, like, I love this process. I love seeing someone sell and someone buy. And I really do want you to get your deal done. But I also want you to be really careful, because sometimes when you spend that 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks working with another bank, and then you want to pivot and go with someone else, the seller could at that point say, you know what, I think I'm done. I decided I don't want to sell, or maybe I want to sell it to one of the other offers that I was getting. I don't want to start all over again. And so I'm glad you brought that up, but I'm also glad we were able to get it done for you. So, it ended
Yeah,
up working out.
I would definitely say working with there was a big difference between working with this other bank and working with First Internet Bank and your team, Jared. It was a more professional process. You could tell that you really knew what you were doing, and you churn out a lot of these deals, and so it just went a lot smoother after I started working with you. Kind of a funny side note: the other lender I had been working with, just the individual that I had been working with, his church needed this large incline platform lift. It's basically a lift that can carry a wheelchair up the stairs, which is very different from a stair lift. It's much more heavy duty because a stair lift, the person just sits on a chair on the stair lift. Um, and a stair lift secures to the stairs, which is a lot easier to do than to put this incline platform lift, which has to secure to the studs in the wall. There were a few things that the seller did that weren't great during the transition process, but basically, while I was still doing due diligence, I brought the seller this deal with the former lender, and he sold it. He collected 90% of the money for the deal, left me 10% and the responsibility of installing it after I bought the business. And it's been one of the biggest challenges since we bought the business. We're 11 days into it. We actually have a support technician from our supplier here with us this week. He's here from Toronto actually, and we're finally finishing it up. And it's just been a massive headache. And so that was another problem of going with the other lender, is that we got this job that I really wish we never got.
Oh man, well, if my church ever needs a lift, I will let you know, and I'll actually go out and help you or something. So
Well,
we'll
we're
figure it out.
honestly at the point where we'll never do this type of lift again. We'll just sell them an elevator instead, because this has just been way too difficult to install. And it's a unique type of lift that is, not everybody needs.
Well, it's something important, I guess, to learn kind of as you go with the business, and those are some of the things that you have to try to understand from the very beginning. So probably kind of leads into the next phase of the business. So you closed, you took over. How did the first couple days go, month to kind of walk me through that?
Yeah, for sure. In a lot of ways, it was hard for the first week, 2 weeks, month. But in some ways, it also went more smoothly than I expected. Having operated my vending machine business for a while, at the beginning of owning that business, I made some really bad mistakes that I learned from. And I just kind of went into buying this business with the assumption that, hey, I'm going to make some big mistakes and it's going to be painful and I'll figure it out, but it's not going to be very much fun. And in some ways, it was actually smoother buying this business, because I went in with that expectation. From day one, I was with the seller installing Stairlifts, trying to learn these products, and I just felt like a lot of information was going over my head. He was telling me so much that it just felt like I'm never going to get this. But obviously, with time, with weeks and months, I'm learning a lot about these products and I understand them better. I can do some of the basic installs myself already, and then the more sophisticated installs, we've got installers who do those. I've made a number of mistakes. One of them that I would definitely want to share that I think a lot of people could learn from has to do with Google. Is this a good point for me to
Yeah,
share some of
absolutely.
this,
Yeah.
Jared?
That was going to be my next question, was if going back, if someone called you and said, "Hey, I'm about to take over the business. What should I really pay attention to?" So go for it.
Yeah, so I think it might be helpful for me to provide a little bit of context. The business that I bought, Western Stairlifts, before I owned it, was the owner and an installer. And so the owner wasn't really trying to grow the business. There was a lot more business that he could take on if he just hired a few people. So I came into the business with the idea that I would hire some people, really work to grow the business, to find more jobs, to get more leads. And so a big part of my focus was ramping up our Google marketing and just doing anything I could to get more leads. We've even been handing out flyers at senior centers. We've been doing some door hangers in some 55 plus communities and been getting more business from that. But I was really focused on how I could grow the business. And our business, our warehouse is north of Salt Lake City. And so most of our business has actually been north of Salt Lake City, which is a less densely populated area than Salt Lake County. And we were still getting plenty of business in Salt Lake County, but it wasn't proportional to the population. So I knew that we could get a lot more business in Salt Lake City. And so I had the idea of, well, let's open up another outlet somewhere in the Salt Lake City area so that our business shows up twice on Google Maps. And just really didn't understand how Google business profiles work. I did some reading online about virtual business addresses and these different things. And I thought we could just add a second address to our Google business profile. So I went ahead and bought a virtual business address, shared it with the marketing company that we work with, and one of their employees just changed the business address from our actual warehouse location to this virtual address without me really giving him confirmation. I was still doing research about these virtual addresses and realized, number one, like Google does not like you using virtual business addresses. They kind of see it as something deceptive. And so right from that point, like I'm not trying to do anything I shouldn't. I'm not trying to game the system. So right from that point, I decided, okay, we're just going to shelf this idea and think about how we do this later. Maybe we do open up an actual second warehouse in Salt Lake there in the Salt Lake area. So the next day I changed the address back to the actual warehouse address. And so whenever you're making a change like that in your Google business profile, Google will ask you to re-verify your business. So that wasn't too big a deal. They gave me video verification as the method to do that. So did the video of the warehouse, of the sign out front, and a week later they said, hey, you're not verified. You need to do it again. A week later, same thing. A week later, same thing. And I had no idea why it wasn't passing verification. And then on July 31st, the business actually got suspended from Google. And this whole time, I just have no idea what I did wrong. I thought it may have something to do with reviews because the seller wasn't really trying to get reviews. Over years, only had 12 reviews. And I started asking every customer to leave a review, got 17 more reviews over 2.5 months. And so I thought maybe we were flagged just because, hey, there were 12 reviews over 12 years, and now there's 17 in the last 2 months. Something weird is going on here. And so I was focused on that. Just actually a few days ago, I was reviewing the Google business profile again and realized that the little red arrow on the map was still pointed at the virtual business address in Salt Lake County, which is 30 minutes from here. So I realized that's why the business got suspended, is because the address is up here, and 30 minutes south is where the arrow is on the map. And so there's a big discrepancy there. And so that's, I think, why Google suspended us. But so I fixed it already a few days ago, but still, I've just been waiting to get a response to my appeal for the suspension, and I'm not hearing anything. And there's no one that you can talk to at Google, and so it's been really stressful for me because we're not getting as many leads. We haven't gotten as many leads in August as we were in June and July, and it's still okay because this business has been around for so long, and we've been getting a lot of referrals. But it's just been a really stressful period, not having a Google business profile, not knowing if or when we'll get it back. So my fingers are crossed, and I'm very hopeful we'll get it back now, but I'm still having to wait and see. And so my word of advice for people would be just to tread lightly when it comes to Google, especially if your business is dependent on it. Don't make tons of changes to your Google business profile without really understanding what you're doing, because they can shut you down and there's no one that you can call or talk to. And you just kind of have to wait for them to hopefully fix it for you. But that's been my biggest challenge with owning this business so far.
That was some great context, and unfortunately, it's a good story to for other people to listen, but it's at your expense, and so that's never fun. But there's so many things that I feel like people don't realize or they don't understand about Google, about some of the payment processors, your banking, your website hosting, email. There's so many like little things that people don't really think about, and they're so concerned with just getting into the business and then, running at 100 miles an hour, trying to do 7 different things, that they don't realize there's little things that need to be transferred over and taken care of, especially when you're a smaller business and you don't have, somebody specific for your marketing and somewhere else that maybe would have had some expertise in that. So hopefully they will listen to you and get it turned back on. I wish I had somebody there that I could say, here you go, call this person, they'll help you out. But unfortunately I don't, but at least you hopefully are almost on the other side of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I totally agree with what you said. You don't know when you're getting into a small business like this, just how many hats you have to wear. I'm doing everything from learning how to do installs to managing all the transition stuff in terms of Google and the website and all that. So there's just a lot on my plate. The good thing is, despite this drop in leads that we've had, just given where the seller was at personally with his health challenges, we're just answering the phone more consistently than he was, and and calling people back. So just by doing that, I've already been able to grow the business. In June and July, we did 60% more business than the seller was doing in his typical month. So despite having lost our Google business profile, the business has still grown meaningfully. I'm trying to take comfort in that.
Yeah, you should be very proud of that. Often what we see is when someone takes over, the first 3 to maybe 9 months, there's a dip. and then a rapid increase. So if you're already seeing an increase, you should be really proud of yourself. It should just kind of only grow from there, and you'll probably see in the next couple months a really steep incline. As more and more people kind of discover you, you get the hang of everything, and your marketing will start really kicking in. So be really proud of yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I've definitely built a good foundation with this business. I've hired a full-time employee. I found a second installer, who's kind of a 1099 contractor to do installations, getting him trained up. So we've built a good foundation to really grow this business, and I'm sure we'll see some of the fruits of that in the coming months.
Yeah, sounds like you're ready for it. So, all right. So, sounds like you got through the transaction. You're kind of wading through some of the challenges, but you're definitely getting the hang of it and getting over it. So, what would you say is next?
That is a really good question. A lot of people have asked me questions like, Do you see yourself selling the business in a few years, or what's your goal with the business?" And I've from day one just kind of always said, I'm taking it one day at a time, and I don't have any specific plans in terms of where I want this business to get to, or if I want to sell it at a certain point. I'm just having a lot of fun working on it and growing it and seeing results from that. So right now, I mean, I definitely know that I need to kind of delegate more responsibilities and focus more of my efforts on actually operating the business versus doing service calls and installations myself. For right now, I want to learn all of those things, but I definitely need to get to a point where I'm focusing on the business and sales and marketing primarily versus doing a little bit of everything. So I guess that's my goal in the near term, is to get to that point where I can actually have enough time to do all of the emails and all of the accounting and just all of the business related things that have been hard to get to.
Yeah, that's a great goal. You mentioned earlier you like to attack your goals, so I'm sure you will do that in the next couple months. And I'm really happy to hear that you're doing so well, and appreciate you coming on and answering so many questions. We always ask 2 questions at the end. So first one I'll ask is, do you have a mentor, or have you ever had a mentor?
That's a good question. I'd say that my dad has always been my mentor. He's had a successful business career, and he's someone that I can always call for advice. He doesn't have a lot of it. He's worked in the finance industry and just doesn't have much small business advice. So I've talked to him about some of these Google things, and he's been a good person to talk to, but doesn't doesn't know a ton with that specifically to help me. But yeah, he's been a great mentor just in general for business and life, and I really appreciate all the help he's provided me.
Well, I think he's done a good job with you, so good
Thank
job for
you.
him. All right, and then the final question is, what motivates you?
Yeah, good question. I guess I'd say my family. My wife and I have 2 little kids, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I'm motivated by being able to provide them with a good life and being able to spend time with them. I've been busier now than I ever have been before, but I know with being a business owner, I'll be able to get to the point where I can spend just a ton of time with them and take time off when I need to attend their sporting events and other school events and that kind of thing. So I'm definitely very motivated by the opportunity to make a lot of money by owning a business and growing it and reaping those benefits, to provide my family with a good life and to be able to spend a lot of time with them.
That's some excellent motivation. So definitely can't get away from that. And most people that I ask that question, when they answer that way, I see them be very successful, because every night when you're going home, you're reminded of what your motivation is. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll have to catch up again sometime soon. If we can ever do anything to help you, I'm definitely here for you. And I appreciate you coming on and taking some time out of your schedule and providing a lot of really good, helpful advice for people looking to buy a business.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I appreciate you having me on the podcast, and look forward to hearing what I sound like.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. We hope you found this podcast informative and helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. For more information, or if you'd like to discuss a transaction, please go to www.jaredwjohnson.com.